23 Appman, extended version. This time tomorrow, Rodney. Barney looked at his watch. He had not even managed to get the quote right. It was this time next year, but Shuffle had thrown up that old track by the Kinks. He loved that album and always thought that the stuff they released towards the end of the 60s. There was no time for this mindless thought, and yet his mind thought less when work was required. As the song continued and blended into another, that skewed his train of thought's path. Of course, this time tomorrow he would not be a millionaire, nor this time next year, nor any time in the foreseeable future, because he had failed. His intended work was a steaming turd of little or no worth. All good intentions that now meant little, little compared to the legible something that they had once represented. It was 4 a.m., the Jameson was 12 years old, the age he was when he started dabbling with computers seriously. When programming replaced minge, booze, and larks that were all around him, to devise the electronic means to enjoy minge, booze, and larks. His eyelids hurt. He knew that feeling, the late-night sensation of eyes trying to suggest openly that they should spend some hours closed, heavy eyelids willing themselves downward in the hope that the brain will be fooled into an energy-saving mode. Normally, he would concede to sleep's tantalizing advances, but he had work to do. When he began this project, he would nonchalantly hoover up the purely medicinal elements of chemically impure quality with 50 and 100 bills. As time dragged on, he was forced to use flimsy-looking, dog-eared fivers and rolled-up train tickets he had previously admired with a sage nod, proudly claiming decent roach material. That he took a dose of the necessary and returned to his lathe. Revived and replenished, he returned to work. His first action was to scrap everything he had done until that point. That was the easy bit. In the reflection of the mirror he could see his girlfriend, asleep and unaware of his latest nonfeasance. He was amazed they were still together, then he rectified. They weren't really together, she just hadn't got around to leaving yet. If she had had anywhere to go, there she would have gone. He had made little or no effort to rekindle or even maintain a semblance of the average misery levels he put her through usually. Barney was prone to allowing outside influences to have a bearing on his life decisions, and he had deemed that the current situation between North Korea and the USA meant that it was not really a worthwhile investment of his time to treat her in any other way than someone who occasionally contributes to the rent, and is in possession of a fully functioning vagina. Maybe if the tension between the two fatheads dropped, he would give her a more serious position in his life. In the meantime, there didn't seem much point. He would be so terribly apoplectic with himself and the hours wasted listening to her drivel, only to be rewarded with a 4-minute warning and an unfulfilled life. No, unless she was replaced by someone with a more suitable status on the time investment, return benefit coefficient. He had an Excel spreadsheet on this, something unlikely to happen as it would involve regular showering. She would be treated to low-level attention. She was hard work too, and he did not relish hard work even for his own gain, so for hers, it was even less supposable that it would happen. He joked with his only friend, Steph, that she is harder to impress than the gay friend of a perennial 40-something spinster. Maybe she wasn't that hard to please, more like he wasn't trying that hard to please her. Anyway, that's enough stalling in a desperate attempt to reach the word limit. Barney had 4 hours to submit his project. An app? He was sure he had devised a potentially life-saving piece of equipment that would allow hypertension sufferers to be able to know their BP levels via their smartphone and send their location and data to their doctors. This would reduce drastically the amount of time needed to find a patient during a potential emergency or suggest measures aimed at controlling levels. As he was preparing his acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize, he realized the hunk of steaming shite was practically useless. It didn't work. Not only that, it was vastly unreliable into the bargain, suggesting that perfectly healthy people were seconds away from myocardial infarction, whereas people on their last legs were told to have a cream bun and an embassy number 1. That would have guaranteed him a first-class degree. Now, he had to come up with something to save a tutu. De fucking monde. He joked to himself. If he failed to get anything in, then he would not graduate. How do you design an app in 4 hours? He took another healthy line and leaned back into his seat to think. That was the moment, call it what you want, but that was the moment that saved his graduation. Anything would do, the bare minimum, was what he had been told, and here he had it. He fell off the chair and banged his head. Immediately, his brain sent a reaction memorandum to his voice which emitted the word fuck, at a loud volume. His thoughts were, how ignominious that in this day and age and with the technology we boast that we should still have to do our own swearing. The number of man, and woman, for they have potty mouths too, lost due to cursing must be putting a strain on the economy. Imagine an app that takes care of all your profanities and exec rations without the need for you to open your lips. Imagine the time that would save, imagine the moral aspects, you no longer bandied obscenities about. Either he was high as a kite, or he had had a brilliant idea. The logistics of the app were remarkably simple. Upon detection of the severity of the blow's impact, the app would emit a swear word to concur with the discomfort suffered. For example, a minor misfooting on the street leading to a loss of balance and an UNGA melee recovery would send out shit. An actual fall with noticeable contact and potential injury would be met with fuck. And anything in excess of the impact of human skin on an opening airbag would be greeted with cunt. He tried it out a few times to get some shit, then fell onto the floor to receive a fuck. There was no way he was going to ruin his own phone with this at the experiment stage, so installed the app on her phone, then dropped it out of their third-floor window with the volume at maximum. Below he heard a faint cunt, and sent the project to his course director. She would hate it, especially the C word, but she would not be able to fail him. He lay down next to her, feeling drained and ready for a doze as he typed the last words. Now, in the comfort of the bed designed for sleep, the drug that for most of the night had been noticeable in its absence, now decided to invite itself for lunch and bring its annoying family with it, once again coursing around his system to prevent any slumber. He caused her to stir and fumble for her device rather than reaching out for a hug. "Seen my phone?" she asked. "Not since last night," Barney responded. 14 billion downloads later. That tuxedo would need a replacement soon. It had seen some nights, and with more around the corner. The left cuff was looking a bit battered. Despite a net worth of now in excess of 100 million GBP, he amused himself frequently by going to cash machines and checking his balance, stepping to one side when there was a queue so that he could create what he termed a seethe wave. On more than one occasion he heard his famous app utter expletives in the background. How he despised those hideous utterances. The utterances that had made him rich beyond his wildest dreams before his 25th birthday. The utterances, they said, had changed the world. Barney thought it was a joke. He never considered his app would even leave the course director's office, but someone saw its potential in a world devoid of potential. At first, it became a favorite with the youth and other groups for whom there were never enough fads. Then the plaudits came. App of the Year. Barney thought it was a piss take. He was sure that he would arrive at the TV studio and be treated to the vocal version of this emoticon, but it was real. All too real. The announcer rambled on about how the app had been a source of liberation for people without the ability to express themselves. Asperger's, autism, and Tourette's groups claimed that the app was a marvelous step forward in treating these hideous conditions. An adapted version of the app was used as the basis for a documentary that followed 3 children with severe Tourette's syndrome and showed them beginning to enjoy the semblance of a normal life. But Barney used his fortune to devise the app that he had in mind before the swear fest. He managed to tweak and twiddle with the once discarded app specs to create something that worked and would help society. Once the furor of the other app died down, he would pardon himself in the world's eyes by launching the BP controller. In the meantime, he was forced to continue with the charade. The app gave rise to a novel, entitled Knocks for a Pound, in which the hero was a clumsy detective who solved crimes after accidentally stumbling upon evidence and activating the app. The novel was penned by the upcoming voice of the youth Gaylord Shibudakwiki, who suggested that Barney should be up for the Nobel Prize, not for science, but for literature, as reward for freeing civilization from the shackles of its language. Just when he thought that no greater, or dafter, acclaim could be awarded to him, some ridiculous government, NGO, or charity would splash him on the front page of their latest news bulletin for services to the community. That brought him to here, to this point. Time magazine. Man of the Year. There was no great woman behind this great man. She had lasted only days into the initial furor of the app. Angrily leaving to a chorus of cunt, as she dragged her suitcase down the stairs, after buying a new phone, of course. He acted like a rock star and helped himself to app groupies who would leave the next day without a sound, unless they tripped, though this action became less erotic as time wore when certain girls liked to leave the app running as he pounded into them and caused the headboard to collide with the wall. There was an ongoing challenge between the groupies to see who could go from shit to cunt the quickest. He was being interviewed as if his contribution to the world truly were something to behold, as if his life's work had made the world a better place. The #1 song on the download chart was a remix of Axel F. from Beverly Hills Cop with smartphones thrown against Guantanamo Bay inmates to provide the lyrics. The app was constantly being updated, now out of his hands as he sold the rights and would never need to work again if he lived to be 200. Before the interview there was a delightful video montage of all the good work achieved thanks to the app in our new swearing-free society. The musical turn before he spoke was a rapper asking for forgiveness from women for his misogynistic tomfoolery in the past. Inevitably, the chorus was them hitting him with sticks with retro iPhone 3s attached. Then Barney spoke. "This is such bullshit. Do you not realize that I'm spinning you all along? I've made billions, can you fucking believe that? Billions from a stupid and useless piece of shit. How the fuck has this made your lives better? Why the fuck am I on the cover of Time? You've gone mad, you're a mad bunch of C." The interviewer stopped him before he could say that word. People had not heard actual swear words for a couple of years now, and the only people who used them were low-grade data accumulators, the term used for people who had not embraced apps for expression. A needle shot up through the seat and sent Barney off to sleep. That was the end of the swearing, the presenter thought as he set his anger rating to very high and sat back whilst his smartphone expressed his current emotions. Barney awoke in a white room surrounded by nothing that he felt any attachment to. The first thing that he noted was that he was not in his own home. He had spent too much time painstakingly contracting designers to fashion out a place so unquestionably him, to think for 1 minute that this squalor represented Barney. He wondered how long he had been out cold. He certainly did not feel too bad, there was no painful hangover from the concoction of drugs that had sent him to sleep. Indeed, he felt quite sprightly on first glance. He moved his head slowly and to his delight observed that he was not strapped to the bed and appeared to be in possession of the standard allocation of limbs. He stirred to get out of the bed and ascertain exactly where he was. There were no mirrors in the room and a single clock just said 12 o'clock on the 1st of January 1999. He was pretty sure that he hadn't traveled in time, so assumed that the clock was not at operational readiness. He poked around the room yet found no trace of Barney or his opulent former lifestyle. In his haste to discover the truth about his current surroundings, he failed to notice two significant things about his own body. It's strange how we overlook the important business whilst engaged in the folly of attending to our needs. For the first time, he noticed a dryness in his throat and attempted to swallow in the hope of creating a modicum of saliva that would alleviate his symptoms whilst he sought out liquids. There was a hole in his mouth where once his tongue had proudly resided. Foolishly, he refused to take his brain's word for it and repeated the process. There was no tongue. There was a sort of stub where it had been cut out, but that was it. He screamed. He didn't scream. That made no sense. The lack of a tongue would mean his ability to articulate sounds would be impeded, but the tongue did not make them. Why was the rest of his voice silent? He poked a finger inside and bemoaned the item he was not bereft of, imprecating the fact that he had chosen this precise moment in his life to use the word correctly for the first time. The second thing of note was the hands. How in the name of the sweet baby Jesus had he not noticed this before? The pain. Every simple movement was pure agony. The only time that the smarting abated was when his entire hand was in a limp resting position. Both hands hurt to the same extent. He decided to try a visit to the toilet, and with great discomfort, he managed to extract his member. At least that had not gone the same way as the tongue, he consoled himself. These discoveries did not tell him any more information as to where he was. There was a door, but it had no interest in opening. There was a screen, but it showed scant intention to furnish him with information. Despite the pain, he continued to root around the room for clues. It was small, he guessed 4 meters by 3, though he used to guess his importance and worth to society and misgauged that. Inside the wardrobe he found a series of items with his name on them. 7 pairs of black briefs. 7 pairs of black socks. 4 pairs of black jogging pants. 4 white polos. 2 black jumpers and 2 gray pajamas. That was his wardrobe. Everything was neatly stored and folded, but there was nothing else. No personal items. No signs of his past. In the bathroom area, separated with just a curtain, he found a toothbrush and paste, a bar of soap and deodorant. None of the products had any manufacturer's name or any other telltale clues that would provide any extra information on his location. He decided to accept that he was being punished. For what? For saying naughty words on the telly. He considered that to be a chastisement somewhat in excess of his crime. Fuck, he thought to himself. At least he could still think swear words. He sat down on the bed and waited. Just as he was getting the hang of the waiting game, the screen illuminated and the word work appeared. With that, the door opened and a red light flashed above the doorframe. He moved toward the door, expecting that whatever was on the other side of it would be more informative than the contents of his sparse room. As he made his way out of the door, a sort of drone robot thing ushered him in the right direction. He did not expect much from his place of gainful employment, but when confronted with a space measuring half the size of his bedroom with just a ball and a blue line on the far, though maybe the better description would be near, wall. He could see what were they? Inmates. Prisoners. Residents. Patients. They were involved in the same activity, much more heartily than Barney, whose fingers could barely grip the ball before reminding him of the pain in his hands. He threw it just 8 times at the wall before giving up. He tried in vain to make contact with the others, but they never raised their heads, thoroughly engrossed in their ball chasing. This was his work? What kind of work was it? Whatever it was, he was no good at it, and that would clearly be an issue later. There was another noise and the others stopped. A slat appeared in the wall and a printout came from it. The information on the paper was a sort of summary of his performance. With his 8 throws of the ball he was now entitled to 4 food credits, though no leisure or entertainment credits. He was also informed that he had so far this month accrued 0 luxury item tokens. At the bottom, there was just a sad face. Another sign came to life stating nourishment. The robot thing appeared again and he was marched into another area of the same space as the working area, but this time with a touch screen that acted like a vending machine to provide him with his food. This was the first real indication that the calendar on his wall was wrong. Unfortunately, the only product he could obtain with his 4 credits were crisps. Soup was 6 tokens and liquids came included with any purchase over 6 tokens but could not be bought alone. He tried to swallow one of the crisps but it just got stuck between the stub and his throat. He convinced himself that he wasn't really hungry anyway. He could now see into the other cubicles and the colleagues from his work area enjoying their sustenance. He then realized the purpose of the ball game. He promised to bear that in mind for the next time. With no tokens to spend on leisure or entertainment, Barney returned to his room. The door closed behind him and he sat on the bed. The clock had moved on to 12:02, was this progress? There was nothing to read, watch, or do in the room. There wasn't even a window to look out of. He thought about getting angry but decided to leave something for later. Then the screen came on again. Barney could see 3 people on it, dressed in white in long gowns and looking overly serious. He wasn't sure why he would expect them to be anything less than serious, but their demeanor still managed to surprise him. Hopefully, some information would be forthcoming. Good afternoon, Resident 326B. Today has not been a particularly gratifying nor successful day for you, and we feel the need to reiterate the need to stress the overbearing need for your commitment here to be of the highest standard. A male voice said. For some reason, Barney was reminded of that committee in Superman 2 who sent generals Ed and that lass, Ursula. Why was he wasting time thinking about this, into space in a sheet of glazing? Whether he was expected to respond was also an issue. When he tried, they took it as motive to continue their explanation. Ladyhead 2 continued. You cannot respond because your tongue has been removed. This was a preliminary measure undertaken before your arrival here. I am also reliably informed that as a secondary measure, your vocal cords have also been extracted, meaning that the utterance of any kind of sound is a physical impossibility for you. Please nod if you have understood, she said. He nodded. She continued. Your hands have also been afflicted with arthritis, though this can be cured depending on your willingness to put said hands to good use. You have been here for 6 years. Your sentence is for a maximum of 15 years, though given your lackadaisical efforts in the work arena, it is highly probable that this period will be extended due to lack of proof that you are ready to return to society. As your memory appears scant, I will take the liberty of refreshing it. You are here because the famous app that you invented was not your work. You stole it off your former partner and became a success on the back of her work. It was only following your disastrous appearance on the television that information squads began to investigate your past and discover the truth. Once the true creator of the app was ascertained, all of your assets, unlawfully accrued, were passed on to her. She now enjoys the adulation you took for granted, and has her place in history assured. You have been reduced to little more than a footnote. Our watchword here is atonement. We want you to be genuinely sorry for your actions, as that is the first step on the road to recovery. The first step is essential for you to one day return to society in some form. You have the chance to prove your worth here and make it clear that you are fully repentant of your actions. You have a unique chance to make amends but seem intent on disregarding this. Should we continue to feel that you do not deserve this chance, you will be removed from the luxury you currently enjoy, and be forced to do what is vulgarly known as proper time. I assume this message will reach you with the good intentions it has been sent. Barney, repent, do something that will prove your worth. Or be thrown to the dogs. Thank you for your time. The screen went dark again and the clock moved to 12:03. The door opened and the drone brought in a bowl of soup and a vitamin drink. He devoured the meal as if it were the first time he had eaten in 6 years, to him it was. On the tray, there was a small screwdriver. Not big enough to do any particular damage with, but clearly there for a reason. He took it quickly and sat on it while the drone removed the tray. The door closed behind the drone and Barney began to look around the room to find something to unscrew. Every screw he found was too big for the tiny implement he held painfully between his aching fingers. He looked at the screen. Were they watching him? It was probably a safe bet that they were. Surely if his actions were underhand, he would be stopped in an instant. He continued. He found it. Under the table there was a small ventilation grill. The screws were exactly the same size as the quasi-drive. How he adored that word, it reminded him of his dad. It hurt but he got them off. It seemed like the more intent he was on finishing the task, the more his pain subsided. Removing the grill, he found inside a notepad, a ballpoint pen and a rather old iPhone, maybe a 3. He opened the notebook and read. The first page said hide these items with the screwdriver. If they find them, they will be confiscated. Pages had been torn out, but he could make out vaguely through the imprint of the ball pen on the pages, equations that he had done previously on a sort of app. He switched on the phone. It worked, and there was no passcode. He was taken straight to the main menu. As the phone began to work, he received a notification: you have been granted 20 food tokens. Would you like to consume them now, or later? There was a box with the two options. He chose later. The phone had only one icon on the screen. Developer. He pressed it and saw the structure of how to design a rudimentary app, quite similar to the one he had used. He stopped and thought. He had used it, hadn't he? That was his work, wasn't it? He was sure he could remember everything. She wasn't even good at coding. She didn't design anything. He was inspired now. He began to make calculations. The sums that had eluded him the night he had to hand in his project now came to him with crystal clarity. He tried to say app, but couldn't. He knew he could not get his tongue and vocal cords back, but maybe if he managed to build the app he was destined to build, the three faces would see he was repentant and allow him to return to society. As he worked, the pain in his hands disappeared almost, only returning when he looked up or took a break. Notifications came through informing him of his newly earned leisure tokens, entertainment vouchers, luxury items, and even trips outside. He clicked for these to be accumulated in his cloud piggy bank and continued with his work. The shell of the phone may have seemed like some mid-noughties smartphone prototype, but the technology seemed to change as Barney advanced with his work. Its capacity expanding in line with the power of the creator's brain. He was not aware of the actual passage of time, but noticed how the clock on the wall began to move quicker and quicker through the past, as if it were speeding towards the date of his incarceration. Despite rejecting the notification for liquid replenishment, the drone brought in another vitamin drink, and this time a little something on the side. Was it a 12-year-old Jameson? God, that tasted good, he thought. The phone asked him, another. He rejected the offer. He had to be strong. He had to finish this task. Once all his calculations were in place, he tested the app. It worked. His BP was fine, so he decided to accept the refreshment request, purely for medical purposes. The drone returned with 4 glasses of the golden liquid, and a line of something white on the side. He drank 2, took the line, then had the other 2. He connected the app again and saw his BP at 17.3 over 9.4. This activated the medical team alarm, and he was informed that help was on its way. In the meantime, the app informed him he could try any of the recommended guidelines that flashed up on the screen. He sat back and smiled. There were now 2 icons on the screen, the original developer and now, BP monitor. The whiskey and narcotics raced through his body as the screen came to life once again. This time, instead of the 3 doer faces, he saw a type of entertainment console offering films and music and much more. To his delight, he saw the playlist he used to love in his car. A third icon appeared on the phone remote control, and he moved through the menus. With the music blaring out, he felt good for the first time. He wanted more drink but decided to wait. The room changed too. It got bigger, as did the bed. How did they do that? Other items appeared in the room, and a 4th icon came onto his phone luxury. He browsed through the options and saw his balance was more than enough to allow for certain luxuries. The first thing he bought was a voice box. The drone brought it into the room and helped him attach it. It worked by the user thinking the words they wished to articulate and the machine doing the rest. What was important was not how it worked, but the fact that it did. For some bizarre reason, with all of the words in the English language at his disposal, the first noise that came from his new voice was Paul McCartney's Frog Chorus. A news icon appeared on the phone, and he saw how already his new app had saved lives. The headline in the Independent simply read Redemption, and there was an interview with the three talking heads extolling the virtues of their institution. The clock on the wall was now moving at normal speed, but the date was the date before his television appearance. Had he done it? It certainly looked like it. A new notification told him of his release date and bank balance. Not a patch on what he had before, but certainly not a shoddy amount. He smiled to himself and ordered more whiskey. This time tomorrow, he would be out. He would not make the same mistakes again, he would live a decent and fruitful life. He had learned his lesson. The future was smiling on him. This time when the whiskey came, it was not the drone who entered but a nurse. "You have had quite a day, Barney. I congratulate you. However, you need your rest. Tomorrow is a big day. The time is now 23:59 and you get grumpy if you go to bed after 12. Remember?" she asked. He didn't remember but was prepared to take her word for it. "So then, are you ready for your nocturnal reset?" She smiled at him. Nocturnal what? In his haste, he had altered the voice box and was using a South African female's voice. "Every night we have the same thing," she joked. "Your sentence is a nocturnal reset. Every night before you go to sleep, the system wipes your memory so that you have to start again the next day. I guess the fact that it works can be seen in the way you ask me every day. Anyway, I'll count you down." She was like a smiling executioner as she applied the reset. 30, 29. 28 she started. "Wait, I've cracked it. I have the app, it's working. I'm out tomorrow. Don't reset me," he begged. 12.11.10 she continued. "Stop the process. I'll give you half." He was crying now. 3.2.1. Night Barney. She finished. Barney awoke in a white room surrounded by nothing that he felt any attachment to.